let's get started. Good morning, everybody. Is everybody ready for another fun-filled morning of chemistry, Chem 1211, and today lab with your host, me, Dr. White. And first of all, I hope you all uploaded your tests already. Don't forget the lab you did last Friday is due today or by tomorrow morning at the latest. And make sure you upload that as a single PDF file to Blackboard. All right. Now, since you had a test yesterday, it wouldn't be fair for me to say, well, you should have done the problem set for chapter 9. Also, I haven't finished oh no, we did chapter 9. I have, and there's just, we'll do that next Friday. So what do I do this morning? Let's go through some important things for test number 2 you should know how to do. And these are things students have problems with. So practice makes perfect. What will be, what I'll be doing today is I'll go through for a little while some important things I think you should practice again and help you learn. Then I have a special surprise for you. And then I'll go through the lab. And for those who want afterward, as I just mentioned, you can stick around for my Mardi Gras story. Remember the first day of class, I say you'd learn a lot about Dr. White, my personal life, and you are. All right, let's get to work. All right, everybody see the whiteboard? White screen, thank you. All right, now, one of the things we talked about already, notice I say we, I did, you listen, is electrons. And electrons surround the nucleus, which contains the protons and neutrons. So where do we find electrons? We find electrons in electron shells. And shells are the area around the nucleus where electrons are approximately the same distance and have approximately the same energy. Now, each shells have subshells. And subshells, which are located in the shells, have electrons which have exactly the same energy and are exactly the same distance from the nucleus. Now, one of the things I taught you was the shell names, and they're very complex. And also how many subshells each shell has. And the ampersand's right here, that means number of subshells. And the shells, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And those are the names of the shells. And I taught you that 1 is the lowest energy shell. And that's important to know. And as you go down the table toward 4, the shell energies increase where 4 has the highest energy. Now, shell 1, this is real difficult. How many subshells does it have? 1. Shell 2, how many subshells does that have? 2. 3 has 3, and 4 has 4. So this is an important table, tells you the shell name, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and the number of subshells each shell has. Now, when we talk about subshells, they were given letters that came from atomic spectra. I don't know why they picked these letters or names, but S, P, D, and F. And S is for sharp, P is for principal, you don't have to notice, D is diffuse, and F is fundamental. How they came about that, I don't know. This really isn't my area of chemistry. I'm an organic chemist, but still, this is important stuff. Now, it's important to know the max number of electrons you can put in a subshell. And S is 2, P is 6, D is 10, F is 14. Now, these two tables, good news. A couple of years ago when I taught this, or many years ago when I taught Chem 1211, yes, I've been teaching it for a while. It might show. Blueberry. Oh, is that so good? But anyways, blueberry tea. About almost 2 years now ago, I was talking to a colleague of mine who's teaching chemistry too, and he raised an important point, which I considered, and I realized his point was valid. And that is, when I give a test, should I be testing your skill and knowledge of chemistry, or should I also be testing your memory? And the answer in my mind was chemistry, not as much of your memory. So these two tables, which I just will show you again, I used to have students memorize for the test. In order to get test questions correct, they had to memorize it. Good news, you don't have to do that, because for test number 2 and the final, you don't need this for test 3 and 4, but you will for test 2 and the final. I will put those two tables in important information. You do have to memorize and actually learn how to use those to answer questions. So let's find out, how do we use those to answer questions? And the most important thing to use these is to determine where are the electrons, sort of like a counting of where you put the electrons. And we call that the electron configuration. And this tells you what shells and subshells all the electrons of an atom are, which is quite important to know. So let's look at the following. Hint, 3 points each. And I might write give, or I might also say draw. I've done both. And give the electron configuration for, oh, let's do one. I'll do this one. And you know I'm going to share the fun, because these are fun. Oxygen. Well, what do you do? Well, in order to do the electron configuration, you have to know how many electrons does oxygen have. And hold on while I open up my periodic table, which I didn't do. And hopefully it looks familiar. It's the one you use for test 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and the final. And let me make it visible to you. Let me check. Everybody see the periodic table? Thank you. All right, so right now we have to find how many electrons oxygen has. And you look at the periodic table, oxygen chemical symbol O, and the atomic number tells you how many protons and electrons. And the answer is 8. So now we'll go back here and we say we have 8 electrons to deal with. Well, you always start filling at the lowest energy shell and subshell. And shell 1 is the lowest one. It only has one subshell. By the way, I forgot to put here. S is the lowest energy, and as you go down, it gets to F, which is the highest energy. So the lowest energy shell is 1. It has one subshell. Remember, a subshell is always a number and a letter. So the first place we can put electrons is in the subshell for 1, 1s. How many electrons can we put in 1s? 2. You don't have to memorize this. Those charts will be given to you. Well, am I done? No, I have 2 electrons. I need to have 6 accounted for. Well, how many shells, subshells does 1 have? 1. Well, I filled it up. So now I have to go to the next energy shell, and that's 2. And 2 has 2 subshells, and the lowest energy is 2s. Remember, subshell, number, letter, 2s. How many electrons can I put in 2s? Well, if you look up at the table here, any s subshell is 2 max. Well, I need to go 8. I've done 2. I can put 2. I've got 4. I still need 4 more to get to 8. So 2s is filled. How many subshells does 2 have? 2. The first one is 2s, and the second one would be 2p. Well, I'll put that down. How many electrons maximum can I put in any p orbital? 6. How many do I have to do? Well, I've got 2, 2, so 8 minus 2 plus 2, which is really 8 minus 4 equals 4. I can put up to 6 here, but I only need to put 4, and I'm done. The electron configuration for oxygen is 1s2, and that's superscript here, 2s2, again superscript, and 2p4. And I've accounted for all my 8 electrons. Now, on this sunny morning, oh, by the way, I don't know about you, but I've been spending a lot of quality time with my driveway snowblower, and yesterday actually was my shovel. I hope the rest of my house isn't getting jealous. I'll have to spend some more time with my rest of my house this weekend. Hopefully it won't snow much on Sunday. I'm tired of snow already. All right, let's have you have some fun. Why don't you draw the electron configuration for sodium? Now, the first thing you need to know is how many electrons. So I better show you the periodic table. I'll give you 10 seconds to find that out. Time's up. Sodium, Na, how many electrons does it have? 11. Remember atomic numbers, number of protons and electrons. Here we need electrons. So we've got 11 electrons to deal with. And I'll scroll this up so you can see these two tables and get to work. That wasn't polite. Start. Please do the problem. Well, one of the above. Get to work. Oh, it warms my heart to see everybody working on electron configuration on a nice sunny Friday morning. And we've got a full house, standing room only. Everybody's here. Thank you for all of you for showing up. I know some instructors have said on that courses like this or VCM, not everybody shows up. Well, my students show up. Thank you. And when you're done, give a thumbs up emoji or clap your hands or smile. And for those of you done early, please be patient. I try and give everybody time to finish. All of you, hurry up. Now, if you're having problems, you're new to this, so don't feel concerned or anxious. We'll also have practice problems. All right, anybody need more time? And the answer is, I guess not. Let's do this. All right, we're asked to do the electron configuration. And if you look up here, you're dealing with numbers, letters, or letter, and superscript. Numbers, and that's the electron configuration, which shows where are the electrons in the various subshells. So 11 electrons. Where do we start? Lowest energy shell, 1. How many subshells? 1. What is that? The lowest energy subshell? S. Remember, subshell, number, letter, 1s. How many electrons can we put in 1s? 2. I can do that, and I did. Are we done? No, we've got 9 more. So how many subshells does 1 have? 1, and we filled it up. So now we have to go to the next lowest energy shell, which is 2. How many subshells does that have? 2. What's the first subshell? The lowest energy is S. Remember, a subshell is a number and a letter, so that would be 2s. How many electrons can we put in any s orbital or a large subshell? They go by either name, and the answer is 2. So I'm going to do that. Am I done? No, 2 plus 2 is 4. I've got to get to 11. So how many subshells does shell 2 have? Well, it has 2. Well, what's the first one? Well, we did that. 2s. The second one, remember you go from lowest, always fill the lowest first, would be 2p, which you can put in 6 electrons. And here I have 2p. I have 7 to go, so I can definitely put in 6. 2 plus 2 plus 6 equals 10. 11 minus 10 means I have 1 more electron to go. Well, how many subshells does 2 have? 2. 2p and 2s. And we fill them up. So now I have to go to shell number 3. What's the first subshell in shell number 3? S. So now remember, a subshell is a number, 3, and a letter, S. I can put up to 2 electrons in there, but I only need 1 more. So I'll do this. And therefore, the correct answer for the electron configuration of sodium is 1s2, 2s2, 2p6, and 3s1. And that's how you do it. Now, everybody, remember, doctor, don't tell anybody, but remember my special gift to you for electron configuration on both test 2 and the final. I'll only ask you to know how to go up to magnesium 12. Why? Because when you get later on the periodic table, the rules break down. There are exceptions. You got to do this before this and this. It's not worth the time learning that when there are other more important things that you'll probably use in your daily life. And one of those won't be the electron configurations of copper. Trust me, you won't. All right, let's move on. Now, another important area of chemistry are the valence electrons. And you should know that valence electrons are the outermost, if I can spell it, the outermost electrons of a atom. I think it's time for Dr. White to be subtle. You should know what is the valence electrons. Don't you love it when I'm subtle? And how do we determine valence electrons? We look at the periodic table. Everybody see the periodic table now? Thank you. All right. Now, the valence electrons are not all electrons. They're only the outermost. Therefore, you do not use the atomic number like for 11. What you do is look at the top of the column that an element is in on the periodic table. And for test 2, this is the periodic table you'll use again, and look at that number. And if we look at sodium, the Roman numeral, and also I put down the numeric number because I found out about 2-3 years ago, I think it was 2 years ago, a number of my students then didn't know Roman numerals, which are what these are. And 1 tells you sodium has 1 valence electron. Now, when you know 1 in a column or family, you know them all. Now, even though hydrogen is not an alkali metal, it's still in the same column. And for valence electrons, hydrogen also has 1 valence electron. Magnesium and calcium too. If I come over to my favorite element, carbon, I also like hydrogen a lot, and oxygen, nitrogen, but carbon is my favorite. It has 4 valence electrons. For those who don't know Roman numerals, IV is 4. And nitrogen has 5, oxygen 6. Oh, I like chlorine, 7. And let's do neon, which is a noble gas, has 8. VIII is Roman numeral 8, but I also wrote it in both black and red. And therefore, that's how you find valence electrons. Those are the outermost electrons. Now, an important concept, and we'll learn more about why this is important, is let's get back to black. The Lewis structures. And Lewis structure is a way of showing the valence electrons for an element. And you put 1 dot on a side before you double up. Each dot corresponds around the chemical symbol. Each dot corresponds to a valence electron, the outermost electrons. And you don't double up until each side has 1 dot. So if I were to ask, Oh, my first grade teacher would be happy. Oh, he writes good now. And let's do oxygen. So how do you do this? Well, you look at the periodic table and you say, where's oxygen? Chemical symbol O. How many valence electrons? Not the atomic number. That's all the electrons. You have to look at the top, VI, or the number 6, tells you have 6 valence electrons. So I have 6 valence electrons. Dr. White likes to let the paper do the thinking, so this way I won't forget. I have my chemical symbol. I'll put 1 dot on each side. And organic chemists like to double up these. This is one way. There are 4 others. 2 sides have 1 dot. 2 sides have 2. I could have just as easily done this. When there are 2 others I could have done. And that's how you draw the Lewis structure for elements. And I'm going to have you try one. And why don't you draw the Lewis structure for bromine? First thing I'll do is let you take a look at the periodic table. And you've got to find out how many valence electrons bromine has. All right. Oops, I shouldn't have left this yet. Time's up. It's not 35. That's total number of electrons. Go to the top, VII, or the number 7. Bromine, Br, has 7 valence electrons. And now I'll give you a couple seconds more to draw the Lewis structure. Time's up. And what we do is we put the chemical symbol, Br for bromine, and we put a dot on each side before we double up. That's 4, but I got to go to 7. That's 5, 6, 7. This is one way of doing it. There are 4 others. Each of them, 3 sides would have 2 dots, and 1 side would have 1 dot. Example, this would be another example. Notice 3 sides. You never have more than 2 dots on a side, and you never put double up before each side has 1 dot. And that's how you do Lewis structure. Oh, let's do one more. Let's pick a good one. Why don't you do the Lewis structure for nitrogen? Draw the Lewis structure for nitrogen. And the first thing you need to know is how many valence electrons does nitrogen have? I'll give you 10 seconds to figure that out. Time's up. Nitrogen, chemical symbol N. The valence electrons number on top of the column, V is Roman numeral for 5. So nitrogen has 5 valence electrons. And why don't you go ahead and drive? All right, time's up. 5 valence electrons. You put a dot on each side before you double up. And organic chemists like to put the next one. I have 4. I have one more because 5 minus 4 equals 1. And organic chemists like to do it that way. And you can do 3 sides have 1 dot and 1 side has 2 dots. Now, if you did something like this, that's wrong. Because Lewis structures, each side should have 1 dot before you double it up. If you notice, this side has no dots, which stand for the valence electrons. And that's how you do Lewis structures. Now, next Monday, I'll get into probably where we use Lewis structures and why they're so helpful. All right, any questions on anything I just covered? Going once. I'm looking at the chat, see if anybody has anything. Going twice. All right, it's time for a special little gift from Dr. White. It's just a little gift. I didn't have time in lecture. Usually I do, but for whatever reason, I didn't have time or felt I had time to fit it in. But we've got time today. So I'm going to show you something from YouTube.
Sometimes you need to get away from the kids for grown-up time, or get away from the grown-ups for kid time. Whether you've left school,
let me make sure you can see it. Everybody see YouTube on your screen? Thank you. Let me maximize it, and I'll let you enjoy it.
whether you've left school or you're still at school, you can appreciate the sheer fun and mayhem that chemistry can be. There's so much to it. Bunsen burners, mixing chemicals. Very nice. Now, you may have been allowed to mix very small amounts of lithium with water. You may, if with a responsible adult, have mixed H2O with sodium. And you may, under very strict scientific control, have witnessed potassium mixed with water. But the odds are, if you have, it will only ever have been on one of those rubbish science videos. There you go, mate, present. Oh, thank you. These next two are the dog's nuts of the periodic table. They are, if you like, the king and queen of alkali metals. Mix these babies with water, stand well back, and watch the mayhem. And that's just what we're going to do. Mr. Tickle, bring on the rubidium.
Here it is.
Is that it?
Well, it might not look like much, Richard, but it's a highly reactive metal. It's sealed in this glass tube under argon atmosphere conditions, just for safety.
Right, so what's going to happen when you drop that in the water?
Well, imagine, if you will, letting off a hand grenade in a bathtub.
Righto, I'm off. Have that.
Okay.
Good luck. Okay, Tickle. Drop the rubidium in the water.
Stand back, everybody. This one's going to be bad.
2 grams of rubidium will only react when our specially designed vial dissolves in the water, which gives John a few crucial seconds to get into our safety zone. Yes! Whoa. That is more like it. Only on Brainiac do you get that kind of science. But I believe we can go one better. There is one more alkali metal we can legally use.
Yes, Richard, cesium, the emperor of alkali metals, particularly nasty to go off at any time.
And that's it.
Oh, yes.
Brilliant. I like it already. Now, what's that going to do when it hits the water?
Imagine a depth charge in a bathtub.
Fair enough, mate. I'll leave it. Good luck.
Thank you.
Okay, John, go for it.
Warning, 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 extreme danger, clear the area.
That's our cesium sinks in the water, the rapid generation of hydrogen gas should produce quite an explosion. And it does. Magnificent. And I think that concludes today's experiment. There is, I should say, one more, even more reactive metal, francium. But for some reason, they wouldn't let us have any of that. So there you go. Today's lesson.
Never mixed alkali metals with water.
I hope you all enjoyed that. Now, years ago, some boys from a high school who were in a group called Science Seminar, which were allowed free access to the storeroom of that chemical storeroom of that high school, borrowed a couple pounds of sodium. And they went to Lake Michigan Beach in Evanston and with slingshots had fun shooting sodium into the lake. And you saw boom, like you saw in that movie. And this was well before 9/11 because the following happened. This was about 6:30 in the morning in late May. And a policeman drove up. He got out of his car and said, "Boys, what are you doing?" And one of the smart students who was doing that said, "Officer, we're investigating the reaction of alkali metals with Lake Michigan water." And he said, "Oh, well, be careful," and drove away. Boy, smart thinking person. You didn't see those fingers go up. A sad note about the video I just showed you. A couple years after that came out, the Mythbusters, which is a great program, came out and showed the explosions they showed in the bathtubs were, how should I say, highly embellished with dynamite. The amount they used was too small to do that. But if you use a large amount like this, it would have that effect. So it will do that in large amounts. And later in the semester, I'll show you another Brainiac. Brainiac, I don't know if it's still, I don't think it's still on, was an amazing TV program from Britain where those guys go nuts with chemistry and have fun. By the way, all organic chemists when they were young were pyromaniacs and liked to blow things up. You should have seen the stuff I did behind my parents' home in the alley. We had a lot of fun doing chemistry there. All right, guess what time it is? It's time for today's lab. And today's lab deals with detecting signs of a chemical change. And before I do that, I better open up the lab in Beyond Lab Z. Hang in while. All right, now today's lab, and don't forget, anything we do in the lab will never be on a test from the lecture. Anything on a test I give you will always be discussed in the lecture at least 2 times. But labs are a good place to learn other things that you should know about chemistry. And when you mix 2 things together, do they react? Well, how do you know? Well, one way for mostly inorganic, but still some organic too, but more likely inorganic, which this course is more heavily inorganic. I also teach no longer as COD, but I still teach it at ECC, organic chemistry 1 semester for nursing students and other health majors. And that is for inorganic, when you mix 2 things together, you can observe 1 of 4 things. Oops, my finger's broken. 1 of 4 things. I'm going to have to go to the doctor and get that fixed. But anyways, 1 of 4 things that will tell you a chemical reaction happened. What's a chemical reaction? When you mix 2 things together, chemicals or substances or compounds. Those are all synonyms for the same thing. Ooh, I used a fancy word there. My English teacher in high school would be happy now. But anyways, for the same thing, that when you mix two compounds together, when you have a chemical reaction, you create a new compound, make a new compound. So what are those changes that you have to look for to see if a chemical reaction occurs? And this, thumbs up, people. Everybody see the lab? Thank you. All right. When I don't ask that, it doesn't change. Now, this lab you can download from the assignment area for the lab, detecting signs of a chemical change. And it's due next Friday. And there are 4 things that will tell you if you have a chemical change. In other words, you have a chemical reaction occurring. One is a major color change. If you mix 2 things together and the color changes dramatically, then you have a chemical change. What do I mean by major chemical color change or major color change? Well, if you mix 2 things together and it goes from dark blue to lighter blue, nope, that's not a color change. If you mix 2 things together that are, say, red and all of a sudden becomes blue or green, yeah, that's a color change. Or if you mix 2 things together and it becomes black or blue or yellow, that's a color change. So one of the signs for a color change is a chemical change is a color change. Now, a second sign that tells you you have a chemical change or chemical reaction is when you see gas form. How can you tell gas form? By seeing bubbles. And IE is shorthand for the Latin. That means that is bubbles form. So if you mix 2 things together and you see bubbles form, and sometimes when you mix it, you'll see the bubbles in the form of foam. So if you see bubbles or foam, yep, you've had gas form, you have had a chemical change. The next way or sign of telling you have a chemical change is if a precipitate form. What's a precipitate? That means you see a new solid. Wrong thing. How many of you are familiar with the snow globes with the little snowman inside and you shake it all up and you see the little white particles come down? Well, to chemists, you say, oh, look at the precipitate in that globe. No, it's snow. I would say, oh, it's a precipitate. Now you know I'm a chemist. And when you see a precipitate forming, a solid form, when you mix, say, 2 things that are liquid, you've had a chemical change, also known as a chemical reaction occurring. And finally, the last indication or sign of a chemical change is when you have a temperature change. And a temperature change means when you mix 2 things together, it gets hotter or colder than it was. And you can just feel that with your hand, or if you have a thermometer, that will show. And there are other ways of seeing temperature change. And today's lab, you'll determine if a chemical reaction, also known as a chemical change, occurs when you mix 2 substances together. How do you know that? Well, if you see one of these 4 signs, you see a color change, yep, you had a chemical reaction, chemical change. You had a gas form, bubbles, you've seen a chemical reaction occur, a chemical change. If you see a precipitate, a solid form, yep, you had a chemical reaction, which is also known as a chemical change. And finally, if you see a temperature change, it gets colder or hotter, you've had a chemical reaction, otherwise known as a chemical change. Now, something that after the lab today, I have to send out an email to the Thursday's lab people because I didn't explain this well enough. The Beyond Lab Z lab for this, you can't measure temperature change and you're not going to see any bubbles form. Oh, I gave some of it away. But anyways, you're not. So how should I put this? So you wouldn't be deprived, that's a good way, of not seeing chemical reactions where you see it get cold or hot, or you see bubbles form. I like that, bubbles form. That's a new one I'll never use again. But anyways, if you see bubbles form, I went to YouTube. And so there's two parts to today's lab. Remember, in the Beyond Lab Z lab, you won't see any of the mixtures ever form bubbles or get hot or cold because they have no way of doing that. I'm trying to work with Beyond Lab Z. I'm still waiting to hear back from the CEO of there. I know they're busy on a major project now to get it through HTML5 so you don't have to do what you did and download stuff and put it on your computer. But how to improve labs in this lab, I would have them be able to do temperature and see bubbles. And we'll see where that goes, but that won't affect you today. So remember, the Beyond Lab Z mixtures, you will never see bubbles and you can't measure temperature, but you might see the other two. One other thing, and we do this in the lab if you were face to face, and that is maybe one or more of the mixtures, there's no chemical change or reaction, and that's possible too. So let's look at the lab. All right. Everybody see experimental procedure? Uh-oh. Do y'all see experimental procedure on your screen? Thumbs up, people. Yes, thank you. All right. Now, there are two parts. The first part is mixtures 1 through 5, and what you'll do is view the YouTube video and then record your observations in table 1. Now, for mixture 6 through 14, you'll use the Beyond Lab Z and you'll log into it, use the chemistry for higher ed. And I'm going to go through this in a little while, then show you how to do this. Click on inorganic on the top. And then for that, you'll put a test tube in the ring stand holder. Click on the upper first chemical in this table, which is in the upper right of your screen. And I'll be showing you this in a little while. And then click on the bottle for the second chemical in the mixture, table 1, which is in the lower right of your screen, and observe what happens. And then place the test tube in the red container by putting it over the white circle. And then you repeat steps 1 through 5 for the rest of the things being tested in Beyond Lab Z, which are mixtures 6 through 14. Now, if we look at 1 through 5, you'll see I have first substance, in this case vinegar, also known as acetic acid. Second one, baking powder, which is also known as sodium bicarbonate. And what do you observe? Oh, see, note 1. And if you come down to this page, table 1 notes, note 1 is this YouTube. And let's take a look at this one. Sorry about the commercials. Oh. Everybody see YouTube on your screen? Thank you. Let's maximize it. And here you go. Sodium bicarbonate, they call it bicarbonate vinegar. Now they put in a little dye to make it exciting to watch. You don't need to dye. Oh look, bubbles, which makes a foam. And therefore, when you looked at this video, which is note 1 for mixture 1 here, what did we observe? Bubbles or gas. And now you know, I'll give it away, there was a chemical reaction. Hopefully everybody gets this one right. And you get to look at the rest of these 1 through 5 for determining was there a chemical reaction or not. And let's look at 6 through 14. 14. Now, the first one is silver plus, which is how they, HNO3, which I'll teach you later is nitric acid. Let's go to here. All right. Everybody see Beyond Lab Z on your screen? Thank you. All right, where it says chemistry, after you've logged in, you want higher ed highlighted because you can do this one. You want higher ed, click on open. Next, does everybody see titrations calc? Thank you. Next, click on inorganic. This is written in the procedure, but now you see how I'm doing it. And now everybody see the lab here? Thank you. Now, the first thing you have to do, and this is a good representation when you buy test tubes, they're in a box by this company. I think it's VWR. And you pick one up. Notice what I did, put my cursor and it becomes a little hand, pick it up. And now when I put it in the test tube holder, all these light up. Now we're going to use silver, which is the first one on there. And I'll click on that. And notice this is now full. You can see this in the upper and it tells you it has silver in it. Now I don't know if I have sodium chloride. And underneath here where I have my cursor, these are your second chemicals. Let's try sodium chloride. Notice when I put the cursor over the bottle, it looks like a little eyedropper. Very little, look closely. If I click on that, watch over here when I click on it. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, click. And I've added the sodium chloride. Oh, look, there's something changed in there. Now, one of the things that is a little different over here is called a centrifuge. And a centrifuge is a way of separating a solid from a liquid by spinning it very quickly and using gravity. In case you don't know, your washing machine is a centrifuge. It separates the water from your clothes when you want it to. Helps dry it out before you put it in the dryer. Well, it took me a while because I was trying to put the test tube in here and it wouldn't. What you got to do is turn it on. Now, watch here or here. See how the white is distributed throughout the test tube? When I click this on, watch what happens. Oh, look, it's all at the bottom. And that now tells me I had a precipitate. This is a solid that was formed. Both were liquids. Let's do it again because this is fun. By the way, sometimes takes me a while to get it. There we go. When you got it right in the center, it says clear lab. Let go. Let's do that again. Put the test tube in the holder. Click on the reagent, the first one you'll find up here. Click on the second one. And if you're not sure, is this a color change or a solid? Click on the knob here. It's a centrifuge. Oh, look, I got a solid at the bottom. And now you know, yes, there was a chemical reaction. And it actually shows you formed silver chloride. And when you're done, this goes over here. The clear lab will show up. You let go, goes in the container. In real life, you dump the chemical in a waste bottle and clean out the test tube and reuse it. And then the next one, you go here and you pick another one. And that's how you do it. Now, we're not using the nose in this one, but let's do ammonia. And I have ammonia in there. And if we were using the nose, notice it turned blue. Blue tells you it's ammonia. But anyways, we're not using ammonia we're not using the nose in this lab. And for 6, actually number 7 I did for you. You can put down now, or remember, this is a precipitate, or you can put down solid form. Either way. Oh, you can use abbreviation. Organic chemists, even chemists, are lazy. And for precipitate, we used abbreviation PPT. How that came about, I don't know, but that's used for precipitate. All right, now, remember, 6 through 14, you'll use in Beyond Lab Z. Notice each have the same note, number 6, which is do this experiment in Beyond Lab Z. Now, after you've done that, guess what? I have some questions you have to answer. Which mixtures had a chemical exchange curve? And please use the mixture numbers, not the actual names. Say, if you were to put, there are a couple of them, and one of them was number 1, you'd put down here number 1, and the others that you had a chemical change. Not all of them might have chemical changes. Dr. White can be sneaky. Which ones formed a gas? And how do you know that? And use the numbers and explain. Number 3, which one had a temperature change? And how do you know that? Use the numbers for which mixtures have that. Number 4, did any have no chemical reaction? How do you know that? And number 5, is it always necessary for a color change to occur in order to have a chemical reaction change to occur? And use some of your data to explain your answer here. And finally, I figured I'd put it down. What was your favorite one? And that's the lab. Now, couple things. Remember, this lab is due next Friday. I like that, next Friday, as opposed to last Friday, the one you did last time, which is due today. And you'll make sure you hand it in by next Friday. Now, as you've all learned by now, we've been together a couple weeks. There's no such thing as a dumb question in my life. If you have problems with the lab, what can you do? Come to my office hours on Monday and Wednesday night for help, and I will help you. So that's how you do the lab. Now, guess what? I'm done. I'm going to say goodbye in a second. For those of you after I say goodbye, want to stick around hear my Mardi Gras story, you're free to. If you don't, you can leave. And with that, I'm going to look at the clock and say, yeah, I got you out by 10 o'clock. This is a fast lab. And in real life, I'd have you after this go into the lab, and all this would take you about a half hour, and you'd be out of here if we were at COD by 10:30 instead of 10 to 12. And in real life, face-to-face, my labs, because I teach my students how to do the labs, they get out always quicker than the other faculty members, but they still get to do all the lab. So with that, remember, after I do my goodbye, if those of you want to stick around for my Mardi Gras story, stick around. And with that, I'll see you on Monday. Have a nice rest of the weekend. Gang gesund, be healthy. Goodbye.